welcome back to my channel. Today I'm doing my May wrap-up. So somehow May was both the worst and the best reading month I've had all year. If you remember back to my May TBR, I was talking about just being really optimistic and hopeful that I would have an incredible reading month because I had some extra time off work and things like that. So I was just hoping to read a lot of books basically, and that didn't really happen. I only finished 7 books in May, and that's not bad or anything. I mean, me from 3 to 4 years ago would have been ecstatic about that number. But these days I'm just reading more usually, so I guess in May in particular I was just hoping for something better. So yeah, a little bit disappointed with that, I'm not gonna lie. But the positive thing is that I read such amazing books in May. I gave out so many high ratings. I had 2 5-star reads in May. That doesn't happen very often. I had a couple of 4.5-star books, and just overall, I read really great books in May. So yeah, I guess let's just go through them. And as usual, I'm just going to go through the prompts from the Bookish Bingo TBR for May and what I read for them. So the first prompt that I got was to read a crime, mystery or thriller. And for this prompt, I read Stillhouse Lake by Rachel Kane. This is a thriller. It's the first book in a series that I think is also called Stillhouse Lake. I talked about this book in a reading blog that I posted in May, so I'm not going to go too much in depth here. But basically this is about a woman who learns that her husband is a serial killer. He has murdered several young women without her knowing. And it's now a few years later. He is now in prison. And she's just basically trying to move on with her life together with her 2 kids. So she's basically trying to create a new life for them, but they constantly have to move and create new identities because people find out who they are, because there are a lot of people who doesn't believe that she is innocent, and they think that she was helping her husband and that there is no way that she didn't know about what he was doing. So this book was entertaining enough as I was reading it, or listening to it I should say, because I read this one on audio. So I think it's a pretty good book if you're into this kind of thing. It wasn't quite for me though. I'm realizing that I much prefer mysteries over thrillers, and this one didn't really have much of a mystery at all. I mean, it kind of did, but it wasn't a main focus of the story, I felt like. So yeah, I'm going to give this 3 stars. It was good, it was entertaining enough, but just not quite for me. The next prompt that I got was to read a book by a 5-star author. So basically that means an author that I've given 5 stars to at some point. So for this prompt I read The Mysterious and Amazing Blue Billings by Lily Morton. This is a paranormal romance, and it's the first book in a series called Black and Blue. So in this book we meet our main character Levi. I'm not sure if that's the correct way to pronounce it. Maybe it's Levi, I don't know. I've been saying Levi, so I'm just going to continue doing that. But basically he is coming to York in Britain to take over an old house that he inherited after his mother's death. But because this house is very old, it needs to be completely renovated. So he moves into a hotel or motel or something for 6 months while work is being done on his house. And during that time he keeps hearing whispers and rumors that there's something weird about that house, but he doesn't really pay that much attention to it. And then, after 6 months he's moving in, and he is quickly realizing that there really is something going on in the house. And he doesn't really believe in ghosts, but after several experiences he does start to question things. So there is this guy that he's seen around the town that runs these ghost tours in York, and he just gets in touch with him because he figures he might know something about the house and about the history of the house. And this guy is our other main character, Blue. And Blue, he comes from a pretty rough background. At the time that we meet him in this book, he is pretty much homeless. He is very poor, and he's just not in a good place, really. He is also psychic. So he kind of reluctantly agrees to help Levi try to figure out what's going on in the house, so they kind of team up to like just try and figure things out, basically. So I'm just going to say it, I loved this book. Like, I had high hopes for it because I really loved the other book that I read by Lily Morton, which was the reason I picked this book for the 5-star author prompt. And this book definitely didn't disappoint. I wasn't sure that paranormal romance would be something that I'd love because I haven't read a lot of it, but this one at least was just great. I just loved the romance. Like, I just can't stop thinking about this couple. I loved both the characters, like they're pretty different in like personalities, but they just fit together so well. They might actually be one of my favorite bookish couples. I'm just going to put it out there, like I love them. They definitely had some issues to overcome, especially Blue, but the way that they were just standing so strong together, like it was just wonderful. And I really liked the way that the paranormal aspect of this was wrapped up as well. The solution to the like mystery, maybe it wasn't super surprising or anything, but like I was happy with how it ended. So yeah, I absolutely love this book, and because I loved it so much, I couldn't help myself. I had to immediately read the second book in the series, so I picked up that one. And the second book is called The Quiet House. And in this book we continue to follow Levi and Blue, which was just wonderful. Like, I feel like in a lot of like romance series there are a different couple in each book, which I usually love. But in this case I really just wanted to read more about Levi and Blue, so I was so happy that they were the main characters in the second book as well. So in this second book they are asked to come to this big old mansion in Yorkshire, because after the events of the first book, without going too much into spoilers, they are kind of known for dealing with haunted houses. And this particular house is known for being the most haunted house in the country. So I really liked this second book as well, but I didn't love it quite as much as the first book. I think that's because while the first book felt like a romance with some paranormal aspects, this felt more like a paranormal book with some romance, if that makes sense. I felt like the romance was more in the background of this one. Even though it was still very much present, like it was still very much there, it was an important part of the book, but I felt like the paranormal mystery aspect was more of a focus of this story, as opposed to the first one where it was more in the background. That being said, I absolutely loved spending more time with Levi and Blue. I loved seeing how they kept working on their relationship and just growing closer. Also, this book took place around Christmas. And while I wouldn't necessarily call it a Christmas book, I feel like if you want to read a paranormal romance around Christmas time, this would be a really good one to pick up. But definitely start with the first book. These books should definitely be read in order. So yeah, really enjoyed both of these books. I'm giving the first book 5 stars, like I loved it so much. The second book wasn't quite up there with the first one. I still really liked it though, so I'm giving that one 4 stars. The next prompt that I got was to read a book with a dark cover, and for this prompt I read The Gentle Art of Fortune Hunting by KJ Charles. So this is a historical romance, and I'm pretty sure it's a standalone, at least for now. So in this book we meet brother and sister Robin and Marianne, and they are fortune hunters. They are both like really charming, so they just seek out rich men and women in the hopes of finding someone to marry, and so their goal basically is to marry rich. So in the start of this book, the two of them are in London, and Robin, he has his eyes on a young lady named Alice. It just so happens that Alice has an uncle, Hart, who really doesn't trust that Robin is after his niece for the right reasons. So he starts to get involved to protect his niece, who he's very close with, and things kind of go from there. I don't want to say too much, but like this is kind of enemies to lovers, I would say, because this is a romance between Robin and Hart, and the two of them definitely don't like each other at the beginning, to say the least. And the way that the romance developed in this one, it was definitely a little different. And I don't think just any author would have been able to make it work as well as this author did, but like KJ Charles, she definitely made it work, because I absolutely love this one. This was the kind of book that I just did not want to stop reading, And when I had to stop reading, like all I could think about during the days that I read this book was to get back to the book and continue reading. It was basically all I wanted to do. I loved the romance. Like I said, it developed a little bit differently and in a way that created a bit of like imbalance in the relationship, at least seemingly. But I really felt like KJ Charles was able to even that out as the story progressed, and just with the type of personalities that Robin and Hart were. And yeah, this just ended up being wonderful. So this is now my favorite KJ Charles book out of the 2 that I read. I haven't read that many, but yeah, I basically just want to read all her books now because this one was great. And if you haven't guessed by now, I gave this book 5 stars. This was my other 5-star book of the month, or actually my first, because I read this one before the other one. But yeah, 5 stars. It was wonderful. I loved it. The next prompt that I got from the Bookish Bingo was to read a contemporary, and for this prompt I read Galaxies and Oceans by N.R. Walker. This is a contemporary romance, and I talked about this one a fair bit, or actually a lot, in my reading vlog that I posted in May, so I'm going to try and be kind of brief here. But it's basically about a guy who is running from his abusive ex, and he comes to this small town on an island off the Australian coast, and there he meets our other main character, who is a lighthouse keeper. So this is basically just a really sweet small town romance. One of the main characters has experienced abuse in his previous relationships, and that's mentioned quite a lot in here. But aside from that, this is mostly just a really like cute, fluffy romance. So I loved the characters in this, I love the romance, I love the small town setting. I will definitely be reading more by this author. I mentioned in my May TBR that one of the reasons I picked this book in particular was because I keep adding books by this author to my Kindle, but I hadn't actually read anything by her. So I just really wanted to find out if I liked her style and her writing, and I did. This book was wonderful, so I will definitely be reading more. I'm giving it 4.5 stars. But I am wondering if I'd read this in another month, in a month where I didn't have 2 5-star books, if maybe it would have been a 5-star, because I liked this just a tiny bit less than the 2 other books that I read that I've talked about that I gave 5 stars to. But if I'd read this in a month where I just didn't love any of the other books I read, I feel like this could have been a 5-star book because it was really great. It was just like, there was nothing wrong with it. I just liked it a little bit less than the other 2 books that I talked about. So I'm giving it 4.5 stars, like I said, but like it's up there. I really enjoyed this one, so yeah, great book. And the last prompt that I got from the Bookish Bingo was to read a 5-star prediction. And for this prompt I read Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. This is another book that I read part of in the reading vlog that I posted in May. I wasn't able to finish it in that vlog though, so I wasn't able to give any final thoughts, but that didn't really change that much from what I was talking about in that vlog. So I don't actually want to say too much about what this book is about, because I went into it pretty blind and I really enjoyed that. But I guess in brief, it's basically about a fallen city named Elantris, and we're following 3 perspectives, 3 main characters, who all kind of want the same thing, I guess, but they have very different ways of approaching it, which is just like a super vague description, I know, but yeah, like I said, I don't want to give too much away. So this one was my first Brandon Sanderson fantasy book, and I definitely understand why his fantasy books are so loved, because this one was really great. This book just had great characters and great settings, and just like wonderful storylines, and I just never knew what was going to happen, which was really fun. Like I never had any idea where the story was going to go. I'll admit that this book wasn't the easiest one for me to read, and I'm not sure why, because it's not a difficult read exactly, But I just found that I had to take it really slow, and for that reason it just took me forever to get through it. Oh, I completely forgot I actually have the book. I can hold it up for you. But yeah, basically I'm kind of blaming this book for the fact that I read so few books in May, because this just took me such a long time to get through. Like, it is pretty thick and the font is really small in this, so obviously that played a part as well. But yeah, this took me a really long time to get through. I definitely think it was worth it though. I really like this book, and I look forward to reading more fantasy books by this author. So I think I'm going to give it 4.5 stars. Like, I really enjoyed pretty much everything about this. But because I kind of struggled to get through it a little bit, it didn't feel like a 5-star read. But still, like, really good book. And if you're into like high fantasy, then I definitely recommend this. I am wondering if that's why it took me such a long time to read, actually. Like, I'm not really reading that much adult high fantasy, so maybe I'm just not used to it. But yeah, really good book, highly recommend. So the final book that I read this month, this was not part of my bookish bingo or anything, it was just one that I decided to read. And it was Sitting Pretty, The View from My Ordinary, Resilient, Disabled Body by Rebecca Taussig. So this is a series of essays written about disability and living with disability. The author of this book, she's in a wheelchair. And it was just really great. I really liked how the author used her own life and her own experiences to give what I thought was a very nuanced picture of what it's like to live with disability, and just like having a body that looks and works a little bit differently than most. She just made so many good points in this. Like, she would point to things that I kind of knew but that I never really thought about. So this was just really eye-opening to me. And it really made me see a lot of things in a different way. I read this one on audio, which I would really recommend because it's read by the author and it's just really great. Disability can be a lot of different things, which this book was also able to bring up in a really good way. But if you're like me and you haven't really read from a lot of disabled authors, then definitely consider giving this one a try. I definitely like to think that I gained a different perspective after reading this. I don't really want to give it a rating because it just feels kind of weird to rate this kind of book. Like, I feel like I'm rating someone's life and someone's experiences, and it just doesn't really feel right. But like, all in all, it was great, it was eye-opening, it was important, and you should read it, basically. So that was the 7 books that I read in May. I only read 1 physical book, the rest were ebooks and audiobooks. But yeah, like I said, I had a great reading month in terms of like how much I enjoyed the books I was reading, which I think, you know, is the most important thing. So I guess I'm not that disappointed about not reading more, just a little bit. But yeah, that was my May wrap up. At the time I'm filming this, we're already a few days into June, and I've had a pretty good start to the month so far, reading wise anyway. So I'm hopeful and exciting for this month and for the things that I am planning to read during this month. So yeah, that's going to be it for this video. I hope that you had a good reading month in May also. If you liked this video, you can always hit a like down below, or you could subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos from me. But yeah, that's going to be it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon with another video. Bye!